Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Shayuni Lin. I'm chair of PRCA Cymru, and I'm so delighted to see so many of you today joining me and Matt to discuss all things running your own business. I would like to extend a huge welcome to obviously our guest today, Matt, to today's event, which I know will be really helpful to those of you running your own businesses currently or planning to start your own business amongst this really unusual time that we're going through. But before we kick off, just a few things on housekeeping. Of course, this is a webinar, so you're all on mute. But if you have any questions or comments, pop them in the chat. Matt will take questions as he goes along through his slides, but there'll also be an opportunity to ask questions as part of Q&A later on in this webinar. So without further ado, let me introduce Matt to everyone. Matt Preece helps business owners meet the everyday challenges faced in growing, developing, starting up, and turning around their businesses. His interest lies in identifying specific needs for each client and helping leaders build the skills that they need to thrive in their business. Matt has nearly 30 years experience in management and leadership, and he works with businesses across a range of sectors, from construction and marketing to video production, fitness, financial services, and more. Specifically, Matt supports business leaders in business development, strategic planning, staff engagement and performance management, and reorganization modeling and implementation. So welcome, Matt. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I know you've got some really exciting information and slides to share with us to help us navigate this, dare I say it, new normal. But hand over to you. And if you've got questions, as I said, please keep them coming in the chat and Matt will pick up as we go along.
It's great. Thanks, Shayoni. Appreciate that. And look, thank you to Leah and Kyrie and yourself, Shayoni, for the introductions and for the opportunity to come and talk to you today. So I'm going to do a little bit of a screen share here and just put this into motion. So slides. So look, it's yes, you're very much true. Interesting times that we've all been living in. So really appreciate everybody that's joined us today. This presentation, to help you sort of capture it memorably, we're going to call it the 6 R's. So after I've done a little bit of introduction, I'll talk you through some material that I've put together around the 6 R's, and then we'll take an opportunity to check for questions as we go through each point, so we can have a little bit of interaction and try and address any sort of obvious questions that people might be developing. It is a fairly generalistic talk because difficult to always know who's going to be attending, and in essence, different people will be at different stages with their business, from startup through to a flourishing state and doing well, to a business that potentially has the opportunity to scale, and to a business that could be sellable. So we will try and give a little bit of information around all 4 of those stages today, but there will be an opportunity, obviously, in the chat bar for you to ask any questions as we get to each one of those areas. And I think, to kick us off, really, I think, if I was to sort of put it into 4 boxes, really, in terms of some of that experience that I've had with people, especially early in the lockdowns of April, etc., that crisis and survival mode was really, really apparent early on. And then when people started to figure out what they could do with perhaps their business or with furlough and grants that might be available, we started to see in some cases good degrees of recovery. And in some cases, because as always with these things, there's winners and losers, and some people are growing their business quite dramatically as a result of the situation that we're all in. So anything from that flourishing state through to having sellable businesses is really relevant. And a lot of businesses have changed the type of products and services they're now providing because the customer demand has changed, and that's very relevant. And during this, we will talk a little bit about that. So I think, the new normal, not everybody likes calling it that, do they? But I think the new normal is certainly something that we're all curious about, and what is that going to look like? And some of the things we're experiencing right now with social distancing, staggered working, people demanding more flexible working options. There's a good chance some of this may well continue, and certainly in the immediate term. But queues at shops, travel perhaps made more difficult. So there's going to be quite a lot for us to contend with as we work our way into 2021 and beyond. So it'd be very, very interesting. So when I'm meeting with business owners, especially if it's for the first time, I start with asking them about them before I ask them about their business. So I will ask them how they're feeling, and that's going to pretty much a mixed story, because lifestyle changes for many have changed quite a bit, especially early summer, late spring. People's making different types of choices, and we've all experienced some version of this. There's hot tub companies out there reporting 3 years worth of sales in 3 or 4 months, as an example of suddenly a demand for certain products that we perhaps might not have been asking for before. And there's such a significant knock-on effect. Even with something like that as an example, there's electricians that I know that would normally fit 3, 4, 5 outside sockets and fit cable for an outside hot tub in a year, and they'd be doing around 40, 45, 50 of these. So it's suddenly become a core product that they keep in the back of the van. So it's surprising what can happen and how things can change for us. And our demands have been quite varied. So in terms of our digital requirements, online gaming, fitness products, all of these products are all showing anything from 15 to 1,000% worth of growth, because we're looking for different things. And some companies have been so busy with their move into an online product, they've had to take their websites down because they've not been able to keep up with the demand in certain cases. So it's very, very interesting how we've all been learning and dealing and behaving through this. So once I've asked how the individual's feeling and what's been going on for them, it's really, really important that we find out how the team might be feeling. Now, this is an area that I think is so important, and so important for the business owner to take that level of interest in people that work for them. Now, I don't know how many business owners we've got on today that employ people, but I've heard stories where, and I've seen some examples where people have been on furlough for significant periods of time, come back to the workplace on a Monday, and it's been Wednesday before the boss has sat down, taking an interest to see how they are. This is so important. The business owner to just expect productivity to go up because people have come back to work may well not be enough. Taking a real interest in what's going on in people's lives, especially while they've been working from home or in a furlough position, will make a big difference. And actually, if we do a really good job of this, productivity will quickly follow. But if we don't take an interest and we don't make sure we've got people's considerations in mind, it will be a blocker. And people are reporting that it's very much a mixed bag. There are people that have really enjoyed working from home and have become possibly even more productive, are enjoying not having to do the 1 hour commute in and out of the office perhaps. But in the main, there will still be a lot of people out there that are anxious about working from home, are anxious about potentially returning to work, and perhaps even more stressed as a result of that. So therefore, taking that interest, understanding how it's affecting people is very, very important. And of course, part of that is around the concern for, will their jobs be safe? Is there a job to return to? So quite a lot to think about there. And of course, how is the business feeling? So I could easily start there doing what I'm doing, but I think I tend to work quite hard at developing a really good relationship, and it usually starts with how people are feeling before it's okay, how is the business looking and how is the business feeling? So there's a few things on here. I won't go through each one of these points, but there's a few things that I've seen happen over the last few months. So business owners have probably got closer to their numbers over the last 6 months than they were before. I've seen a lot of examples where refinancing has had to be done, applications for loans or grants has had to be done. And as a result, we've had to sort of really look at the numbers that are in our business, the numbers that are working, the numbers that aren't working. where our profitability, where do we make most of our money? And also when it comes to people, identifying the sort of perhaps some people that perhaps in the workplace we've been carrying, rather than actually making sure that they're engaged, productive, profitable. And as a result, we've taken a fresh look at our teams, fresh look at the people that we're working with. And if you're a solopreneur, it's not just the people that work directly for you, it's that wider team. You know, it's not uncommon for us to outsource, whether that's social media, whether that's marketing in general, whether that's HR, whether that's payroll. You know, in my world, if I'm helping a solopreneur, that whole of that spectrum of all of those people that you might include in your business to help you run your business, it's all very, very relevant. All of that needs to have a fresh look taken at it. This is an opportunity to become leaner, fitter, and more efficient. And I think it's just applying all of those learnings. And in the main, have you, and I guess everybody will take a look at this at the moment and go, I've not done that, but I've done that. So it's just taking a little bit of time out to think about, okay, what have I done so far and what are my learnings from lockdown? Because in some cases, how has it affected your business will be different for everybody. So let's have a little look. So let's, okay, so I'm going to just take us through the six R's. Have I got any questions so far, Shoni, before I sort of start these points?
No questions so far, but please feel free, everyone in the webinar, to pop in questions on the Q&A or chat function.
Cool. So the first one of the six is return. So yeah, those questions that staff might be asking: is my job safe? Is it safe to go back? How can I safely get to and from work? Because in fairness, in some cases, people are using public transport rather than perhaps private transport. And of course, then you've got questions that the business owner would be asking. How do I make sure that my workplace is safe for customers or for staff to return to or visit? And how am I going to reintroduce my staff back into the business? And do I need to? Because obviously those businesses with large office space potentially thinking, actually, my team are working from home. They're quite productive. They're quite profitable. I'm seeing us still being able to get things done. Perhaps I don't need the office in the way that I've currently got it. Maybe there's a different way of operating altogether. Will I need to make job cuts? Will I be able to afford to be people back after furlough passes? And sometimes the furlough scheme has just delayed the inevitable for some people. But reassessing is really, really important. The structures, the roles, the responsibilities, the ways of working, how people are being, asked to conduct their duties. And if they're working from home and they're going to continue to working from home, what does that communication look like? How do we engage? How do we support? Generally, what I've been seeing over the last few months is where people typically might communicate with their staff once a week. That's typically moved to once a day. The ones that were used to communicating with their staff once a day, it's typically moved to 3 or 4 times a day. So generally, all of that communication has increased in order to stay close and get close to what's going on. And some business owners are still not sure about their staff working from home at all. They generally have a preference for their workforce to be visible in the workplace rather than perhaps working from home. So it's overcoming really all of those internal challenges, as well as putting in the plan that works for everybody. I think the other thing that's really interesting about the business owner, it's a really difficult time as a business owner, because you've got the liabilities and the responsibilities of trying to run and continue to perform in your business, but at the same time you've got different types of desires and wishes from your staff. And trying to balance that is no easy feat. So, I think sometimes make sure you've got some people you can talk to in order to discuss that with and understand your options really to overcome those barriers and blockers. I don't think going on this journey on our own is helpful. In terms of renew, so I think with renew, this is a little bit around having a little bit of a chat with yourself around, okay, well, have my personal aspirations changed? I know a couple of business owners that their priorities have changed. One in particular I know has got a nice brand new Jag, and it's sat on the drive for most of the year because he hasn't been going into the office in the same way. And he's thinking, do you know what? He said, my priorities have changed. It was really important to me to have a really nice car at one point. It's less important to me to have such a nice car now to do my moving around with. So, and then actually the business vision has changed dramatically. Some of that's been dictated too because the customer's demands and needs have changed, and some businesses have been able to pivot and adopt different ways of providing a service. And in many cases, businesses that weren't particularly doing a lot online have gone online, and they're really pushing that product through in a different way because they haven't got the usual space to operate, especially those that maybe sell their product through events, for example. And going online is a really interesting thing because the knock-on effect there is web designers that were perhaps having big problems back in 2009-10 when we had that previous financial crash. On this occasion, they're in demand because they're needed in order to help the business owner to press the e-commerce button and sell those products and services online instead. So websites are being updated, and all of those things are taking place as well. It's also important to assess your purpose. So whilst, I think really, really important to have really strong foundations in a business. Generally, if you're really clear about your vision, really clear about your purpose, and really clear about your values, you start to create a really strong foundation to build your plan on. So the values is really important as well, because whilst we've been identifying perhaps the better staff in our business or the better people that we've got involved in our business, and identify those that are less good and not as profitable, not as productive, that all comes out when we actually are reassessing our values. So this is quite a useful exercise to do this in terms of understanding, how do I now take on my next steps? What are my next steps? And when people are in that crisis and survival mode, the quicker you can get to making some decisions and taking some action, you automatically feel better about what you're doing. Okay, any questions so far, Shirley?
Yeah, we've got a question from Gwyneth. And she says that she works in Wales advising clients who span across the UK and often have found themselves asking about how to communicate differences in devolved regulations surrounding COVID. What would you advise is the best method to share this complex communication in terms of communicating the new and ever-changing regulations to staff?
Yeah, so in fairness, this whole communication model is interesting because in fairness, the updates at certain points have been thick and fast, haven't they? Some weeks it changes, and it can change so quick. And quite often you see it when we get government updates. You can see at the sharp end of all of that, that quite often NHS, schools, police authorities, quite often people are finding out about these changes at the same time as the public. So it's a very, very difficult thing. So I think spending time really thinking about how you're going to land the message so it makes sense to somebody on the ground is so important. And obviously I'm not sure it's specifically what your question might be considering, but I think the communication to staff is so important, and they want reassurance, but they want absolute clarity. So it can take a little bit of time for each business owner to figure out what is the work in practice that suits that business and how do they all get signed off. So even a nursery, for example, that I was speaking with the owner of a nursery, 17 staff on board. They've been pretty active. They've carried on with their business throughout partly because of key workers and childcare still being required in some cases. And she just gets the team. She gets the team in the room every morning for a huddle and has a discussion about, okay, what are the updates? How did yesterday go? What are the priorities for today? And she takes that opportunity to remind them all of the things that they have agreed in terms of their work in practice. So it's quite, what I learned from that is it's very local, it's very hands-on, it's crystal clear, and there's plenty of follow-up.
Fab. We've got another question from Leah, where she has said, I know many communications professionals have gone freelance. What would you say, Matt, is the first step or first couple of steps to setting up for success?
Yeah, good question, Leah. So I think with any new business, really, but I think we will see people looking for an opportunity to go it alone at this point in time. People will be subject to redundancies, perhaps. I think actually this is the opportunity I'm going to take it to do it. These types of events do born new businesses, and so I think the first thing is have a really good idea. Have a really good idea about what it is you're going to do, and I think typically somebody that's got really good skills will take those skills into their own business. But it's about doing your research. So have a really good idea and then do your research. So who's your competition going to be? What is your absolute purpose going to be? Have you got the money to invest? Because typically that first year is where you might spend most of your money on local marketing or marketing, for example, in order to launch your business. You may need website development. You may need to think about who would you need to involve in your operation, and is it something that would you need to employ, or would you need to make sure you just use outsourced options to help you run your business? Are you going to develop a business that's got scalability? So, or is it going to be that you're going to set yourself up as a sole proprietor, sole trader? If you've got a business that's scalable, you may therefore consider, actually, I'll set myself up as a limited company in the first instance. So there's quite a lot to think about in that. But I think if you do your research, you then start to develop a pretty sound plan. And I say to people, if you're really clear about your personal aspirations, your business vision, your business goals, and your values, then that's a really good starting point for thinking about, okay, what am I looking to try and achieve here, and over what period of time?
I couldn't agree more. As someone who has grown quite a lot during the pandemic, I was a sole trader back in June, went limited in October. 4 months ago, it was just me and my network of associates. We're now a team of 9 in-house. And the importance of research, the importance of business planning, the importance of those very mundane, boring things that might not come very easily, or we might not want to invest much time in, especially in communications and marketing. It's so important because it does set you up for success or not.
Yeah, and we might not have all of the skills to do everything. So there might be a need to involve some other people that can help with the things that you're perhaps less good at. Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you, Leah. Any more questions, Shani, or shall I push on? Okay, cool. So in terms of review, this is a really good opportunity to take a step forward. What changes are likely to be permanent versus temporary as a result of COVID-19, in terms of how your business operates, environmentally? What are the things that are likely to affect you longer term? And then probably some questions to ask yourself would be around, what might that mean for your business as a result? Have you got the ability to adopt new ways of working? Have you got the ability to adapt what you currently do and how you do it? There's a fair bit to opportunity. I think if you think about it socially, with people living longer, our lifestyle changes. People perhaps having a different outlook about how they want to develop their career as a result of some of these learnings over this period of time. And then you've got fear, anxiety. There's lots of different emotions out there at the moment in terms of the social impact that things are having at the moment. Technologically, quite interesting. I think I'd only done 2 Zoom calls pre-COVID, and now I do 3 or 4 a day, I think, on a given day. So technologically, we're moving on at leaps and bounds, and there's businesses out there that have pressed an e-commerce button that have never sold online before at all. And in some cases, there's businesses that have brought forward, perhaps, their planning over the next 10 years, brought that forward. So it's accelerated an awful lot of technological development. And because we require it, and because the way that we might want to work going forward might be more remote. So it needs to suit those needs. Economically, very, very interesting one. We're likely to see now higher levels of unemployment. And pre-COVID, we had some very, very good unemployment stats, and that's really changed so much over this last 12 months. And there's a good chance coming post-Christmas, we'll see more. And the effect of that can be less disposable income, and potentially issues with the knock-on effect of supply chain, etc. So there's a lot to watch out for in that space. And politically, just impact on trade, with regional lockdowns, national lockdowns, the nature of the decision making that's currently happening and how that affects people, and that we have to constantly keep reviewing and planning as business owners, how we address that and how we deal with that. So it's yes, look, it's challenging times, but I think really, really important. This is a bit of an external look at your business as well, to be fair, and looking at the factors that are going on and how they might affect you in the short term and long term. The refresh. So this is an opportunity to potentially refresh, the business model entirely that business might have. A really fresh look at the mix. So what products are you selling? What products are more profitable for you? And have you got risks in there, but also have you got opportunities? Is there perhaps other products or other services that you could be providing based on what the demand is? And we've seen a lot of that change. We've seen gin distilleries suddenly producing sanitizer. There's this clothing companies producing face masks, and there will be opportunities for people to think about, okay, how do I help with what's needed, but also as a result keep my business going and keep my staff employed, etc.
It's a timely question.
Sorry, Shirley.
I was just going to say a timely question from Sabrina, who says it's a great session, so well done. And she said, what are your thoughts, Matt, on freelancers creating content that people can pay for, such as webinars or how-to PDFs?
Yes, so look, there is a market for it. I think it depends on the, so somebody like myself, for example, I'm part of a network. So Business Doctors is a franchise model. We've been operating since early 2000s. I'm one of 43 business doctors across the UK, working with clients and helping business owners to improve their business, depending on what those needs might be. There is so many different people out there running a business which potentially would be looking to promote their services in an online model, and webinar is a pretty popular way of doing that right now. So there is a demand for it. In fact, I was speaking with a lady yesterday that does branding and graphic design, but she also is starting to help businesses with pitches and their material for producing presentations, etc. So there is an opportunity in that space, yeah. Okay. This is something that's quite interesting. I'm not going through every point in obviously massive detail, but it's top 10 customers is quite an interesting thing. I think if I dial the clock back to March and April, when I was speaking with business owners, most businesses have done a very good job of trying to figure out what to do for their staff, what to do about the workplace, getting in touch with suppliers, getting in touch with customers. But there was some that didn't. There was some that actually perhaps we were about to owe some money and didn't really want to face into it, were nervous, didn't know quite how to deal with it. Reach out to the customers. I think it's linked to relationships. I think whatever we do during this, this whole experience of lockdown and COVID-19, people will remember how we behave through it when we come out from it. And I think that the whole effort that we all make for each other during this period of time is so important to make sure that we come out, because we are all in it together in some shape or form. Everybody's been affected by this without necessarily doing a bad job to find ourselves in this space. But from a business point of view, prioritizing your top 10 customers, making sure that they're looked after, because if you're a business that's very reliant on one employee, or if the business is very reliant on you as the owner, or you're very reliant on one customer, your business is incredibly vulnerable potentially. So it is about developing relationships and developing opportunities whilst being aware of the risks. And actually, just thinking back to that sort of the political element and the economical element, not many business owners would have an insurance policy there for pandemic. You know, I mean, quite often when I meet with a business owner and we're doing some strategic planning, I'll ask them, you know, if I can see that their business is quite reliant on a few things, then I'll say, well, what happens if you lost your number one client in the next 4 weeks? What would happen to your business? And that's quite often a significant negative impact on that business. So, and that planning ahead, that external review is so important, because you think about Wimbledon back in 2015, about 3 years ago, they did that external review, and they realized that actually a pandemic could cost them a one-off tournament worth about £250 million. So they took out an insurance policy for £2 million a year to protect them from a pandemic. So, and then funnily enough, they've been able to exercise that policy this year. So, so you know, it can be a really big deal to just review everything that potentially can happen to you in terms of the internal and the external factors. In terms of revive, this is the exercise that I call looking in the mirror. So identifying what you're really good at. You know, what are you great at in your business? What could you improve? Where's your vulnerabilities? And what is your edge? So, you know, in terms of those strengths, it's about leveraging strengths more than ever right now. In terms of making improvements, it's about being aware of them. It's about potentially making some changes to make sure that those things are not going to potentially put you at risk. The vulnerable stuff normally is the stuff that wakes us up 3 o'clock in the morning worried about it. You know, there will be something at some point. This isn't the time for putting our heads in the sand and hoping for the best it goes away. This is the time for bringing it out on the table, talking to some people about it and trying to take some action over it. And that edge is, why do people buy from you? Why do they have their products and services from you and not from somebody else? And how do you leverage that? And I think this is a really, really useful exercise to do from time to time, not just during coronavirus, but, you know, I think, you know, I regularly do this type of review with people, and I say, look, you know, every 12 weeks, 20 weeks, do it again. What's changed, you know? And the so what test is whatever reflections you come up with from a result of thinking about the things you're really good at, the things you're less good at. You have to do something with those reflections. So the so what test is, what are you going to do about it? So, and I've put on here time to think like a customer right now in terms of meeting those different demands and needs. And at the same time, thinking about how your staff might be feeling, because actually we're probably going to be feeling quite similar to our customers to a degree. But we want to be positive. We want to be enthusiastic in our business. But there will be some considerations to have around how other people might be feeling. There's another thing, I think, when it comes to, you know, have we got the skills and capabilities to run our business in the future, and you know, versus the way we run it before. And therefore that whole personal development, upskilling, you know, there's potentially some work we all have to do in that space. Review how we communicate, engage, and serve. So, you know, some questions for people to ask themselves is what could make you better? What could make you different, if that's what you're looking for? What do your customers think? Now, this is quite an interesting one. I was with a lady that has her own business as a fitness trainer, and she was having some problem with people not paying properly. She had a system where people paid per lesson when they came, and some of her classes at 6 a.m. in the morning. And they were choosing not to come, couldn't be bothered to get up that morning, looked out the window, didn't fancy it, changed their mind. Well, of course, she was still making the effort to get up every morning and be there ready to take the class. So when we were having a chat through that, so we got to the idea of perhaps those regular clients could set up a standing order and pay monthly. And she said to me, I just don't know how they would feel about that. I'm not sure they're going to like it. I said, well, have you asked them? And she said, no, I haven't asked them. So I said, well, just let's have that as a project for the next 2 weeks, go and ask them and see what they say. And she went and spoke to every client over the next 2 weeks, and everyone said, yeah, no problem. So by that time I met her again, 2 weeks later, she'd already put them all on a standing order. So if they then choose not to get up that morning, she's still getting their money. So I think what we need to do is not make too many assumptions. We need to talk to each other. We need to ask our customers, you know, are they happy with what they want? Is there anything else we can do to help them? Just not to miss the opportunity. and this is sort of relevant when you're thinking about Leah's question earlier, which was around, is now a good time to set up? What are some of those things to consider? And you've got a few different types of businesses. You have got that business which perhaps has differentiation to it, something that perhaps nobody else is offering. You might have a cost-focused business. Now that can be a little bit limited. If you're a pound shop and you've got let's say you call yourself a pound shop, you're a bit limited with what you can bring into that business in order to sell to customers, because they're expecting to pay a pound for most items when they come in. So if you've got a cost-focused business, it's very difficult to perhaps focus on quality of service. And the niche is where you've just identified an opportunity in this. There's a segment within a market that actually is not being exploited, and actually you've got an opportunity to go and have a go at that. So perhaps the other thing to consider is when you're setting up is, what sort of business are you going to offer? Is it going to be volume, low margin, or is it going to be high quality, high-end product, high-end service? And what is it that might be different from what somebody else is doing? So something else to just consider there. And then in terms of regeneration, so important right now is great leadership. And I think we've seen this from a political point of view. We probably have all got our own views around how well this has been managed. But I think within our businesses, really, really great leadership of whether they're directly employed by us or whether it's people that we use to support our business in that utilization space, engaging the team, engaging with suppliers, engaging with customers, and then taking time to make sure that we all reorganize ourselves, set clear goals, set clear milestones to review, and maybe even put some KPIs in place in order to create some positive tension around delivering something different. Have you got your sales and marketing aligned to what you now need? Are people, finance and cash flow got a really clear plan about how those things are going to be managed? What's the effective supply chain, and what are your needs from an IT perspective? The whole business potentially needs re-energizing right now, and there was a lot to put on the table to work out, really. And then it does help us feel better when we start to make decisions and we start to take action. And that review can lead you to that place. Have I got any questions on that, Shoni? So that's the 6 R's. So the 6 R's, just to give you something to sort of play back. And it is about us trying to define where we go from here, as opposed to, follow. I think we want to have some control. And in terms of support, business doctors across the UK, 43 of us in action, there's a few things we have for free. So we always do our first consultations for free. So if people are thinking actually they wouldn't mind just talking through in a bit more detail, specifically how these things might be affecting them, or actually considering having a little bit of help, then that first call where you can discover that and explore that, that's for free. We do some really super staff survey material, which, especially with a team that's perhaps got 15 plus members of staff, it's a super tool for really trying to understand how everybody feels about the business. Really flesh out all the good stuff, flesh out all the things that could be better, and it helps the business owner to have a really clear plan with actually the contribution of the workforce at the forefront of mind. We do some sales activity and planning tools, cash flow tools, planning project templates. There's a new HR platform that we've now introduced. So there's quite a lot available to help business owners that are thinking, okay, where do I get some of these models, some of these templates? How do I get a little bit of help just to get started? And we do offer some of those things. But there we go. So, and I think, and I've done that reasonably whistle-stop tour, but hopefully there's something in there that everybody can take a little bit of something from. But it's challenging. Let's not go on this journey alone. We've got to work together. We've got to find a way to collaborate as opposed to conflict. I think, there probably used to be that dog-eat-dog mentality back in our history, but I'm seeing a lot more people trying to find a way to work with others in a way that's different, and I've seen a lot of that this year, which is super healthy. and great to see, because I think, you know, there's got to be more than one way to do this. So yeah, good. Hopefully that helps.
That was excellent. Thank you so much, Matt. I was smiling when you were talking about the standing order, because that's a behavioral science lever. And as you know, I specialize in behavioral science. I was smiling to see some of these tactics being implemented within the wider business community as well. Thank you. I really enjoyed that as a business owner myself. I'm sure our audience have learned quite a lot from you. So now I'm going to open up the discussion for any Q&A. We've had some questions along the way, but if you've got any specific questions that you'd like to ask Matt, now is the time. Please pop it into either the chat or the Q&A functionality. And I've just looked and we don't have anything right now on either of those platforms. So I'm going to kick off by asking you whether you feel, Matt, that now is a good time to start a business or not.
Yeah, I think where I've seen more people taking an interest in the last few months, it is I think businesses that generally can operate from home, operate with that flexibility, flexible working. It's really gathering interest at the moment. So I think it's to be weighed up. You know, there will be some deals out there. I know some people that have recently done some, you know, bought some pubs because there's some opportunities where perhaps the value is low. So there may be an opportunity to invest or acquire at a very, very good price at the moment, which might be the rescue that particular business requires at this point. So yes, I think that question depends on what it is that you do and what it is you're looking to try and achieve. But there will be definitely opportunities right now out there for people that want to go into it. I think the other thing to bear in mind when, you know, that other question of things to consider, pricing. So many people undervalue the work that they do and the service or the product that they offer. And, you know, I think if you've got that skill set and you've got that product and you've got that quality, making sure that you, and I think this is where solopreneurs probably take a little bit of a while to figure it out. You know, that first year or two as a solopreneur typically underprice themselves quite regularly. So identifying what it is that you're going to do if you're a new business and you're a solopreneur, and what is the value, you know, what is the market industry standard, and then find the confidence with a clear plan to back yourself, so that you don't go into it sort of undervaluing yourself and then thinking actually this isn't working. You got to try and anticipate some of those obstacles really.
Fab. Then Matt, are there any things to avoid when starting your own business? Are there any typical challenges to prepare for?
Well, I think not having a plan would be the number one. So I think if you're going to go into it, you've got to do your research. You've got to have a plan. And you've got to involve some people that are going to help you to achieve it. I think that, you know, success is inevitable. That's what I say to the business owners: surround yourself with people that you think success is going to be inevitable. And if you just try to go it alone without a plan, then I think that's where you probably put yourself more at risk.
Yeah, couldn't champion a plan more. I know firsthand how important that is. Thinking about COVID, and you've answered some of these in either your slides or in the chat, the questions that we've had during your presentation. But what are the challenges that you might have seen business owners face during this pandemic? And what are your top tips for either getting through or surviving? I know you've answered some of this, but if you could sort of maybe do a highlights tour.
Yeah, I think going into a second lockdown was quite interesting because the first lockdown was sort of everybody instant, and everybody pretty much just shut up shop and did as we were told, and then we entered a figuring out stage, which involved, you know, what do we do? How do we look after our staff? How do we still serve customers? What customers were still there to serve? I think when we approached the second lockdown, there was different people in different places. I think there was the element of we might have just got the business going now, but actually what I noticed in the second lockdown, more people were more upset emotionally than people I were talking to perhaps earlier in the year, because we've been a bit of fatigue perhaps. You know, I think there's we've been in this space now for quite a long time, and equally I came across some businesses that were very clear about how to deal with it now in terms of their business plan. and we're able to sort of go into a second lockdown very clear about how people were going to operate, function, trade. So I think the biggest thing probably is, in terms of what I'm seeing now that we're at this far advanced stage, is the emotional element, the mental well-being, and health and well-being. It's becoming more and more relevant in terms of what we're trying to do with our businesses and the customers, the staff, ourselves. I probably back like 3 weeks ago, there was a particular week where I hadn't heard as many people say, "I've had enough now," as they were in that particular week. I think it was the week after half term. So I think that's the part of the challenge is our resilience. And if we are going this alone without a clear plan, without regularly talking to people, without taking some action to make sure that we've got ourselves in as good a place as possible, then I think that's probably the thing that's having the biggest negative effect right now, is dealing with it just emotionally.
Yeah, very true. And I've only got one more question, and I'm going to appeal to our attendees to ask any questions if they have any. But veering away briefly from COVID and looking forward, if that could be used, to Brexit, what should business owners prepare for, and how should we plan for our future when thinking about the changes that are due to take place in the new year?
Yeah, great question. I think it was pretty much dominant. It was probably the only dominant thing in the news at one point, wasn't it? And certainly when our Prime Minister took over, that was his number one agenda, and until COVID has taken over. And but we know that over the next sort of 40 days, Brexit's going to be, we're going to be realising that, and I'm sure there'll be some sort of plan or some sort of arrangement. But for businesses to do that strategic thinking and that strategic planning is still very, very relevant to the Brexit effect. So when you do that external look, if you're a business, especially a business that operates with products and services outside of the UK, it's going to affect everybody a little bit differently. But it might mean that buying in of your product goes up, for example, as simple as that. It's if you've done a full review of your business, you've got really close to your numbers, you can start to figure out, okay, well, let's apply a factor to how much I currently pay for my goods. There might be other options to get your goods from somewhere else, and you might be able to go and explore that. So you may actually find a supplier in the UK, for example, versus the supplier you currently use from abroad. So I think engaging with the strategic thinking, engaging with strategic planning, consider all of those external factors. How is your business going to change? What is that longer term implication of what's about to happen? When the detail comes out, do the detail. So when the detail comes out, get curious, understand it, understand how it's going to affect your business, and then make some decisions around, okay, because to a degree, you want to try and not pass on all costs to your customer, but in some cases you might have to. But that has to be a considered, planned decision, really.
Absolutely. One more question from Leah, Matt. She says that you talked about resilience and not being alone as a business owner. Can you recommend some ways for business owners to find supportive networks?
Oh my word. Well, before I started doing this a few years ago, because I've always been in the corporate world, I didn't realize how much networking was out there. So there is quite a lot of opportunities to get support and to develop, if you like, a business network that's relevant to what you do. So yeah, it's an interesting question because if we're used to a corporate background, we're used to having allies, friends, peers, people that we can share our day-to-day stories with. If you're going to go out and row your own boat, run your own business, and especially as a solopreneur, where actually it can be a very, very lonely place. Making sure that you do identify with some people that are going to be able to help you. So find yourself a long trusted advisor in the first instance. Have you got a mentor, somebody that you already have a good relationship with that potentially could fit for this? I think to have somebody in your life like that you can actually have that great conversation with on a good day and on a bad day can be really helpful.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, not just a solopreneur, even as an agency owner, it's quite hard. not having, especially in a virtual world, not being able to, I've recruited a whole team and inducted them without ever meeting them. So it is very important to find, whether it's a mentor or a group of peers, that you can be honest and discuss some of this in an open way. So yeah, very important. Any final questions? I'm checking chat and Q&A, and there isn't anything that I can see. So thank you everyone for your time today, for joining us. I'm sure Matt will be more than happy to answer any questions. If I'm not mistaken, Matt can be found on matt.preece@businessdoctors.co.uk. Matt, are you on Twitter as well?
I am, yes. BizDocs at Newport.
Perfect.
And my direct telephone number is 07551 745 107. Give me a call.